welcome to Fad Dads. I'm Nathaniel.
And I'm Seth.
And this is the show where we join the conversation about a variety of things, including TV and movies and other stuff.
Whatever we want.
Exactly. And today we're going to be talking about Tomorrow War.
I think that sounds good.
In a very spoiler-heavy way.
Yeah.
So we'll tell you briefly if we liked it or we didn't like it before we'll get into all the juicy details.
Sounds good to me. All right. So, did you like it?
Yes. I did like it. I actually didn't know what to expect when going into this one, but as I started watching it, I go and throughout the process, I go to myself, this is actually a really good time.
Yeah.
What were your overall thoughts?
I'm gonna be honest. I would not have watched it if you didn't suggest it. And so I had seen like Instagram commercials.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was like, okay, it's the new Chris Pratt movie or whatever, and I was not gonna watch it. And so when you suggested it, I started looking at it more seriously, and I was like, okay, that'd be cool. And then I pulled my wife into watching it with me, and she, I had to kind of sell it to her.
How did that pitch go?
So Nathaniel wants to do a podcast. So Nathaniel and I wanted to do a podcast, Dania, and we wanted to watch this Tomorrow War movie. Will you watch it with me? She was like, "What's it about?" And so I have to make this pitch for a movie that I haven't seen, and I was not enthusiastic for myself, right? So I pull up a trailer on my phone, and the trailer actually sells me. That was the full trailer that I watched.
It's a good trailer.
It was. So I was like, oh wow, I actually really want to watch this. Do you want to watch it? And she was like, and I was like, please. So I really had to beg hard to get her to watch it with me, but she did, and I liked it a lot also. I thought it was the most unique movie that I've seen in a long time, as far as the writing went.
Now that's interesting because I thought this movie borrowed from a lot of movies. In fact, probably more superior movies in a lot of ways. And I guess that's kind of something we'll talk about right away.
Okay.
Is I'm watching Tomorrow War, and I can't help thinking of Edge of Tomorrow or Alien in terms of some of the concepts in the movie.
I actually haven't seen Alien.
Well, I full disclosure, I haven't seen either, but I know some of the plots, especially like the origins of the aliens, which are very similar here.
In what way?
I believe. I think they come upon the alien. I think they come upon the ship at a distress signal, and like the only thing left of the ship is this alien that is like hitched a ride, which reminded me a lot of the White Spikes being kind of aboard the as cargo in this movie that we find out at the very end of the movie. So
because I remember seeing a clip from Alien where there's like that thing that's coming out of the guy's chest, right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's kind of the origin there, and in relation to Edge of Tomorrow, I remember the Chris Pratt in the middle of the movie, he grabs an axe and starts fighting an alien, which is right out of which it just brings to mind when Tom Cruise grabs an axe and starts going, postal on an alien in Edge of Tomorrow, and so I thought this reminds me of other movies in feel and in writing. It didn't terribly bother me because I actually don't think the movie is that in depth. But you had a different approach. You thought it felt a lot more fresh.
Yeah. I hadn't seen The Edge of Tomorrow in a hot minute. I haven't seen that for years, and it had aliens in it.
Oh man.
I remember the mech suits. That's what I remember is the cover with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt in mech suits.
Edge of Tomorrow is one of my favorite movies. I think that's an excellent movie. I think, full disclosure, I think it is better than Tomorrow War. But we're going to talk about Tomorrow War though.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're going to get a little bit into it. So okay. So what kind of grabbed you about the movie?
Okay. And what in the way that it was unique was the way it was not a sequel.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It did time differently than I had seen it in other movies, and they fleshed that out in the movie that were different in some ways. Now I can't think of any movies where it did it similarly.
Okay.
But I really liked the way that they had their concept of time, and it's very similar to what I had always envisioned it to be also.
Sure. Okay.
Where it's still flowing in the same direction. Time flows in the same direction, and you can't exactly change things in the past. You can't just hippity hop to whatever past time that there is and just change it, right?
Sure.
In fact,
Now, and you're referring to where they are starting, right? You have a week in the past. You go a week in the future, and when you come back, that week has been lost to you, right? So you can't, you're still
Right.
aging the same way. You can't ever.
correct. You're still aging when you go to the future, right? And so, in fact, this is kind of an interesting. It's kind of a rabbit hole, but you know how it's becoming a growing story that UFOs are now real,
Oh yeah,
right?
right.
Like we don't know what they are.
Yeah, but you have to, like, people from the government now saying, "Hey, look, there are these objects that we can't explain their origin.
Yeah.
We're not sure what they are." Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
And we have people who claim to know what they are, who don't claim that they're extraterrestrial, right? That they're like. Did you ever watch the Bob Lazar documentary on Netflix?
No, you're gonna have to break it down for us briefly.
Okay. So Bob Lazar was a dude who allegedly worked on this project, and his job for the government was to reverse engineer some crafts that the government had recovered, basically. And he doesn't claim to know where they got them. He says he does not know where they got them, but that his only job and his limited knowledge was just to reverse engineer it. And that it ran off of an element that was not discovered at that time in the 70s.
Okay.
And that basically what it did was that it manipulated gravity. And so that was this spacecraft's method of propulsion. Was he described it as if you put a bowling bed on a mattress and you press down next to the mattress, the bowling ball will roll towards your hand, right?
Okay.
Where our methods of propulsion is you throw something off behind you and you go forward, and that pushes you forward. Right. And so it was all centered around this element that did not exist at the time. And he made several crazy predictions that ended up coming true.
Back in the 70s, he made these predictions.
Right, and they are true to this day, including the element that he says is the key to powering the spaceship. Right.
Okay. All right.
And so it apparently is a very unstable element that but it's in its stable form. It apparently has these properties. So that technology may still be beyond us.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I see time travel as being a more viable explanation for if he is indeed telling the truth, because we know that there are indeed these spacecrafts. We have video evidence of them performing unnatural feats of propulsion, right?
Right.
So it seems to me that he's telling the truth. Now, he did not make a claim in this documentary that they were aliens, but time travel would be a more viable explanation to me as opposed to aliens. As far as an explanation to this time, to this spacecraft.
Maybe. Could be. You know what?
I know.
I didn't come in prepared for this thought experiment, but we're into it now. So
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know we're talking about the Tomorrow War, but I just thought it was interesting that as I was watching it, I was thinking this is a good explanation for how I would see the Tomorrow War, or how I would see time travel working.
sure. And when they started talking about the time travel and how they were doing things, my reaction was, "Hey, this is completely stupid." In fact, this would be one of my main gripes with the movie, and I have three of them that are main. And
Okay.
And one of the is that the plot is completely nonsensical, in my opinion.
Okay.
And part of that stems from you have in the past, you're sending people to the future to fight when all along, in fact, later in the movie, it's revealed by Chris Pratt's his character's wife is like, well, why don't we
Right.
stop them in the past? And he goes, wow, no one's ever thought of that before. No one's ever thought that they've been here all along.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, well, wouldn't that, instead of sending people to die in the future, shouldn't you be doing that all along? And there's a bunch of weird things. Like, for example, they grab people who are dead in the future, and they're old, or they're 40 plus,
Right.
in the in the movie. That's where Chris Pratt leaps from. And the explanation is that those people are dead in the future,
Right.
which so it's not a paradox. And my thought is, well, if their lives are wiped, let's say they live for another 20 years, 10 to 20 years, they have an impact on the present. And so if you cut their lives short by sending them future, they die, they never have that impact, you're already messing up the future. So why not send the best people, the 20-year-olds off to fight in the Tomorrow War? In fact, why even fight the Tomorrow War in the first place? You should just be getting information so you can prevent the whole war. Because, right, they don't even train them for 7 days. They don't tell them, what the aliens do, what their weaknesses are.
I think they would have been told that, but it was kind of interrupted by the attack. They had to send them off right away, but they would have been trained for longer.
Well, they would have been trained. They get trained for 7 days, and they are not members of the military. Chris Pratt is
Right.
an exception as being a member of the military.
Right.
And there's a line in the movie where she says, "You're being sent because you're going to add your experience and knowledge to ours in the future." And the problem with that is 99% of them die as soon as they jump. It's like, okay, well, good lot of deal this knowledge and experience added. And so there's some of the issues there. I go, man, this don't make any sense. And right, back to my beginning statement. I like the movie. It's just, I thought, completely nonsensical. Doesn't make any sense. But a good time, nonetheless.
Okay. I guess if I had to make a defense for it,
Okay, all right.
it made sense to me. Now you're probably a lot smarter than I am, so you were thinking of this.
Negative.
No, I guess there was a couple points where I was kind of thinking, okay, they're kind of framing it like you can't change the future, but you can. It was kind of like that, where because the people are going to die anyways, you're sending them to the future, so you can't change the future. Because if you were to drop back in time,
Yes,
those people
right.
would have survived, so they would be right.
Right.
So it's kind of framed in that way that you can't change the future, but then they do change the future.
But to kind of counter that, though, Chris Pratt's daughter in the movie, though, her whole plan is to send the virus back in time with Chris Pratt to
Right.
eliminate the white spikes. So
Right.
her whole plan is to change the future so that never happens.
Right. So, but like the whole concept around the time travel is because you're going to die anyways in the future, we're going to go ahead and kill you in an attempt so that other people don't have to die in the future.
But once again, but the time travel element still doesn't exist because we know Chris Pratt dies in like a drunk driving accident. I think that's the explanation for him. But he could have very easily died in the Tomorrow War. So if he would have died in the Tomorrow War, then he would not have been alive to be alive to leave his family and then die in a drunk driving accident.
Right.
And this is my whole argument to say that let's not think too much about this movie because it's pretty wonky, the plotting of it. Anyway, that was my take after sitting with 2 hours of it.
Okay. Okay. As far as plot holes go, there was only one that really, really jumped out at me, and that was the point towards the end. Well, actually, it was towards halfway. It was a long movie, where they create the antidote or the toxin,
right,
to kill all of them.
Yeah.
And as they're getting attacked, they run out, and he goes, "Shouldn't we kill the female over here?" And she goes, "No, we don't have time." And they both run. I was like, "No, kill the female right now."
Right.
And maybe they'll stop attacking.
Because they're in the spaceship at the end of the movie, and they're injecting all of the white spikes.
Yeah, right.
And they don't inject the female first. They leave the female.
I thought
last.
those were all females.
I think if we watch the, we can pull it up here. All right. So viewers at home, so my prediction is that like the female has like a special breeding chamber up ahead.
Okay. See, so this is what I thought the special chamber was, and those are all females.
Okay.
That was my take.
I see. Okay.
And then remember later when after they deal with these ones, there's that bigger chamber?
That's true, but also there's that conversation with J.K. Simmons where he says one got away, big one with a white
Right.
with a red mark on her chest or whatever.
Yeah,
the
the
case
red
may be.
velvet.
Yeah.
Oh, this was just nasty. I did not like this part. I. Yeesh. Do you think that's practical right there? Like, someone built that out of like resin and stuff.
My thought is that it's probably all CGI, and that's something else that. Right, this is one of my other complaints is how gory this movie is.
Oh, yeah.
and it really surprised me that they can call this a PG-13 movie.
Oh yeah.
While having just copious amounts of alien gore in the movie.
Right.
So that definitely
Yeah.
would be a detractor of me recommending it to just somebody. It would be like, how much alien gore are you comfortable with? Because they certainly got the barrels out in this movie.
Especially with that little clip right there. I don't know. There was definitely something about the movie that felt very real to me. Where they didn't... There were some spots I could definitely... Oh, yeah, that's just CG.
Right.
Especially a little bit later when they got to that one base out in the middle of the ocean.
Yes.
And especially when the White Claws all started attacking.
Yes.
In waves.
Which is I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a really good-looking movie, very expensive-looking movie, and I was kind of surprised as a movie that is not going to hit the box office how good this movie looks.
Yeah.
And I've kind of got some gripes, but the action is really good. The aliens and the way that they interact. Right. Sometimes you watch maybe just a TV movie or a TV show that's sci-fi, and the aliens are very much, they don't interact with the actors because it's not good enough. Here, it looks good. It feels like the aliens are there.
I mean, they were wrestling with it.
Right,
And
exactly.
it looked flawless. I never was like, something weird happened there,
Yes, exactly. And strangely enough, I think the part where they look the most fake is when the mother, or is the female, is actually tied up in the oil, at the oil tanker. It looks it totally looks fake. And they're not even interacting with her at all. So I don't know why that looks so fake to me, but everything else looks really sharp.
I'm interested to see that then, because I didn't notice that, but I wanted to pause it right here real quick, because I loved this shot.
Yes. Yeah, the shot where the female white spike has fallen into the horde of the white spikes. And you've got his daughter, Yvonne Strahovski, in the middle, and Chris Pratt falling. I mean,
Jumping out, yeah.
That's sort of like, you put that on your wall.
I would put that on my wall. But yeah, that's like, it's a Renaissance painting is what that is.
It was, I remember just watching it and being struck how amazingly cinematic that looked. It looks amazing.
Just for this, I'm very sad that it was not in theaters. I would go to the theaters just to watch that.
Right. Right. And it really is kind of the day and age which we're living in, where a lot of movies are not going to have this experience, and it should.
Yeah.
That theater experience.
My prediction though is we're going to. Someone has to put this in the theater. So
maybe we'll see.
It'll be one of those things, maybe a rerun when we're very old. Like, hey, remember that old movie?
Yes, right.
Like in Indiana Jones that they do. They run Indiana Jones all the time now.
Well, during the coronavirus outbreak, you saw that, Jurassic Park was getting played a whole lot.
That's right.
In the outdoor theaters.
Hey, in Rockford, they did Jurassic Park with a live orchestra.
Oh, wow.
I did not get to go see it, but that looked very cool.
That was probably amazing.
Yeah.
What did you think about the actors, the casting of the show?
Perfect. I didn't have any gripes with that either. They got some like J.K. Simmons.
Who's excellent in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I didn't like that he was the... Because I really like J.K. Simmons. So because I saw him in the trailer, I was like, oh, yeah, I get to see J.K. Simmons. But then I realized he was his dad. I was like, oh, no, he's got to be the character who's like... kind of frowned upon sometimes, right. And I was like, oh man, because I really like it, the actor.
Yes.
So,
and he does a great job in the movie.
Yeah.
Yvonne Strahovski, she's wonderful in the movie. I love her in the movie. Here's my unpopular opinion: is that I think Chris Pratt is kind of a block of wood in the movie.
Really?
Man, I just do not think he is much as he's not as much of an advantage to an asset to this movie as he is to other movies that I've seen him in. He's got some just reaction shots where I feel like he's not bringing it, and I'm not even sure why. But yeah, not a huge fan. But you thought his performance was perfectly fine?
I could definitely see where you're coming from when you say that, because I was not completely sold on his father-daughter relationship.
Sure. Right.
I felt like, especially with his grown-up daughter, I felt like it didn't feel like, it's like you're dealing with a different person.
Right.
Like, this person lived a whole life, and it felt like they were leaning very heavily on some of the scenes earlier in the movie where he was with his younger daughter.
Yep.
But it just seemed off a little bit, where I wasn't, like, especially that one part where he jumps after her when she's falling in that one cinematic shot.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't see him doing that. You know, like she's dead. Why would you kill yourself just to die with her?
Sure. Right. And here's the weird thing that it's hard to know. And since you brought up that, so there's that element to with his relationship with his daughter that really touched me. And I didn't feel that way as strongly until he got back to the past and he sees his little daughter, and the little daughter has like the sign that says, welcome home or whatever it is. And I started to tear up a little bit that, and maybe it's because I have, two daughters right now, and they're very precious. They're very small. And I was very moved at that part. But there's also an element to where, that if you go back, like he's promising to come back. He says, once I deliver this toxin, I'm going to come back and help you win this war. I'm like, no, you're not. And it kind of feeds into, and so would a dad, knowing how things are going to turn out, even if you are able to go back to the past, knowing there's no future, do you try to save your daughter? What's running through your mind at that point?
Yeah.
And because it's a sci-fi movie and it's kind of, that whole concept is a little bit removed from all of us, how practical can we expect Chris Pratt's character to be versus how emotional can we expect his character to be in that situation? I don't know the right answer to that.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, and that was something else that kind of confused me, was coming back to help her win the war.
Right. Because if you fix the past, what future are you going to at that point?
Yeah. I think he explained it later, was that he had to make the toxin, hop back forward into the future to distribute it.
But she had already made the decision, though, that the plan was for them to distribute it in the past.
That's what I thought. So that's where I was also confused. I was like, I'm pretty sure the plan was distributed in the past, but then he got super upset because he couldn't go back into the future.
I think they wanted to have it both ways, for you to care about what's going on in the Tomorrow War,
right,
and then to care, which you kind of have to do, because as a screenwriter, it's like, how do I make you care about the characters in the future who we know are doomed?
Yeah.
When the solution is in the past, and none of the characters in the future can go back to the past except for the characters originally from the past.
Yeah.
So if you're a screenwriter, how do you solve that problem? And you kind of make it seem like you can have it both ways.
Oh, okay.
Until you can't.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. Honestly, I didn't need that. Because I had fully accepted by that point in the movie that everyone in the Tomorrow War was doomed.
Right.
So if they leaned on that a bit more and was like, maybe you don't get to see your grown-up daughter anymore, right? Like, this is the last you're going to see your grown-up daughter in this way, perhaps.
Right.
Like, because when he ends the war, maybe she doesn't grow up and become as prominent or whatever. And so then that part where he comes back is going to be a little bit more emotional, right? Mm-hmm. I think them trying to hang on to it and bring that connection, like you said, I don't think it did them any favors.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you one other element where I thought Chris Pratt was a little bit weak sauce, and that was in the very beginning with the opening scene with his father, or the first scene with his father. When he goes to his father, and having an estranged family member, there's a lot of just emotions that are just that are there. That kind of, right, you can kind of suppress them a little bit when they come out, they can be very raw and real, and I'm sure, right, you know a little bit about how this is when you have just a lot of things have happened, a lot of stuff has gone underneath the bridge, and I thought Chris Pratt I didn't believe that J.K. Simmons had done so much bad stuff to Chris Pratt, in the way that Chris Pratt acted. But what I did like, and what I love about this movie, is that the reconciliation aspect of it, where they lean into that so heavy, about the reconciliation between the father and the son, and not just the father and the son, but that we're welcoming this father back into this family. And that is, not enough movies have that message in it, where I thought this was really effective.
Yeah. I didn't like that it took his dad doing him a big favor by using the plane and doing the whole fighting with aliens in order for that reconciliation to happen. I felt like it there was a certain reason why it had to happen, and maybe Chris Pratt's experience in the military and in the Tomorrow War had to play into the reason why he reconciled with his dad.
And I think that's true.
Which perhaps it did, but I didn't feel that connection. It's kind of more of like an afterthought. Like, yeah, maybe that kind of it didn't solidly connect those two things. Like, now that he's had his experience in the war, he understands why his dad had to do what he did in order for that whole. I would have liked to have seen if his dad did not fly them over to Russia so that they could save everything, there would still be that reconciliation. You know what I'm saying?
I do, and I think that's worthwhile. But then you have a kind of a, it doesn't feel that great as a movie, right?
Right.
But I think you're right, and I think what I would say to that in the movie maker's defense is that you have Chris Pratt, who he has his dream of being, climbing the corporate ladder instead of being a science teacher, which he doesn't like, and it's not fully fleshed out, but you get this idea that that's what he is putting his value in instead of his family. And then he goes to the Tomorrow War, and he sees his daughter and how much his daughter resents him for the decisions that he made for abandoning his family. And it kind of gives him the idea of, puts him in his dad's shoes in that sense.
Oh, sure.
So I'm the one who's abandoned my family, and then he comes back and he's much more willing. He decides that he realizes, I need to really treasure my family. I need to treasure the time with my daughter.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be my dad.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to reconcile it with that. And I know there's, when you start to get in the political sense of things, that this movie is taking some heat for, encouraging, traditional family values. But, sign me up for that.
Right.
And because, we need more reconciliation in our personal lives anyway, and more good fathers. And I don't know who's out there saying there are too many movies that promote that, but
yeah. Okay, that's an interesting thought, and maybe I'm a little bit too analytical when I was watching it, because I think I saw the same threads, but I just didn't see them quite the same way as you did, which I completely see it from your point of view now, and it makes so much more sense. But I was thinking, well, now that he's coming back from the Tomorrow War, maybe we're going to see him drift from his family more, like how his dad did, right? But that didn't happen. So that's what I was watching for, because I was like, right, his dad was at the war, he came back, and he drifted. So I was expecting that to happen with Chris Pratt. He comes back and he starts to drift, but it was just kind of the opposite, like you pointed out.
Yeah, but you're 100% right, though. That would have made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
If he kept walking in his dad's footsteps, with the memory of his daughter eventually, of his memory of his daughter from the Tomorrowland kind of pulling him out of that.
Yeah, right.
And because that makes that makes total sense with the character arc. The only issue, right? I mean, it's a 2 hour and 12-minute movie,
Yeah,
right? This movie's already too long to begin with. But that would have been really good to have a couple of scenes where he really does kind of drift away, because you never really get the indication from the beginning of the movie that he's going to walk out on his family in 7 years.
Right.
They look like he's happily married, like he loves his daughter, like he's not going to...
He had his moments with his daughter before he left.
Right. And so that it was hard for me to believe that Chris Pratt was going to leave his family when his daughter tells him in the future that's what he's going to do. I'm like, really? You should have leaned a little bit more into that. But the drawback of that is you dislike Chris Pratt's character more if he has those tendencies in the beginning of the movie. They call it the save the cat moment in screenwriting, where the hero does something to ingratiate himself to the audience.
Right.
So if you're making him mean to his wife and making him mean to his daughter, that can kind of have the reverse effect, and it's also off-brand from Chris Pratt.
Right, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, maybe something like just leave the beginning. I thought that was solid, where he's connected with his family, but he's still distracted, right? And he goes off, and then he comes back, and maybe he starts going down that path that his daughter prophesied him that he did, right? Maybe he starts drinking more, gets himself into trouble a couple times, right? And he's just kind of going down this path until something has to yank him out of it.
Right.
And then he reverts and goes and saves the world.
I think that works. Yeah. I think you fixed the movie.
But yeah, but I think you definitely put a different light on it, where I see it a lot more from not being like, well, why didn't that happen? Why didn't he go down that path? It was more of like, okay, I understand how they were trying to spin the movie in that way.
Yeah, there's definitely the a filmmaker side to it, where it's sort of like movie logic, where we got to make this work so the movie can work, and because we don't have 3 hours to flesh out everything, which is a shame, because I think your fix really completes the movie and really hits all those beats, even if it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, just timing wise.
Let me ask you about the science in the movie, because there's a big emphasis on science in the movie.
Yeah, that's right.
So what was your thoughts on that?
Gosh, I did. From a political standpoint, I saw where they were going, and I didn't like where they were going with it, but they didn't lean too heavily on top of it, and so I didn't mind so much. A popular saying today is, follow the science. And if that were not a saying, I would have enjoyed this movie, that portion of the movie, a little bit more. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. It struck me as interesting that the solutions to their problems was to engineer a toxin that then they use to eradicate their enemies, which I thought was especially interesting coming from where, like coronavirus, where's its origins, because now you have some valid information that says maybe this was engineered, where you have science being perhaps the cause of some of our issues,
right?
And that's kind of stood out to me as being, well, we preach science, but maybe there's an element to where, you're right, science is not the end all be all here, and we definitely need to think about how we view follow the science, because maybe there are some nasty side effects to that.
Yeah. I was so scared towards the end when they revealed that basically the reason why these aliens are out now was because the poles were melting.
Right.
And they were buried under the ice so they could get out.
Right.
And I was so scared that they were going to become climate change activists. to the extent where they were actually successful, they were going to revert the changes of climate change, and it would just keep the aliens under the ice.
Yeah, and that was an interesting part too, because they have like this nice and right, you can read how much into this you want to, but they, in the movie, they tell you that the reason that there's like volcanic ash on the claws is because they've been digging for like a really long time, and so like how much. If you say they thawed out, they also must have done a fair bit of digging anyway. So who's to say they wouldn't have dug out eventually? So that was sort of like, well, global warming still does stink though. So.
Yeah, right. And that was the other thing when they figured that all out. That was one of my no. Yeah, it was one of the movie has to happen, so we have to do this thing, so the movie has to work that way.
Right, exactly. I did think it was interesting, right? They've got they have this push for science, though. It's like, oh yeah, science is cool. Everyone should go into science. You know, the nerdy kid who likes science. You know, we kind of look down at him until we need him, and then we're like, oh man, he actually holds the secret to, you know, saving the future. And so therefore, you know, kids go into science, even though the science in this movie is all about people doing, you know, really unscientific things and you know, just pushing buttons. Oh, 33%. 78% effective. You know, that's the science of the movie. Even though what saves the day ultimately is a gun and explosives.
Guns and explosives, yeah. Right. Okay, so besides that, I didn't mind the science so much. Because I do think that there's something to be said about the importance of science, and that is much of what we turn to today as far to a lot of solutions, and that some of the solutions are actually very beneficial.
Oh yeah.
If we don't turn to it to solve all of our problems, if we try to use it, you know, as a tool to solve the ones that it can, you know, and not to use one for pushing our agendas, you know, certain points of view, you know, it's dangerous to use science in that way.
Right. To apply some sort of a moral compass to science, to say that, hey, science says this, so therefore we must do that, instead of saying, okay, we're going to take the outputs that we're getting from science, and then we're going to filter them through, you know, ethical and religious and political and social views. So we actually have a holistic solution that definitely includes science and includes all the data that we're getting from science, but isn't just isn't a tool that somebody uses to beat their opponents with and say, hey, well, this is the right thing because the god of science says so.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, when science really emerged as like a thing in I think the Enlightenment period of the world, when it became
certainly jumps.
The scientific method, I think a lot of people, as science progressed, started accepting it as truth because of the scientific method, which is incredibly sound in the way that it allows every study open for error, right? You can take it what it's worth, you can dissect it, it can be completely disassembled, you can point out all the flaws with it, and it can be improved upon. It's an ever-improving machine that we've set up that is very effective and has created a lot of solutions. And so it's turned into where that word science is now correlated, I think, with truth. Right. And so when you do see people start to manipulate science to fit truth, that's where the trouble comes in, and this follow the science theme is something that is, you know, definitely should not be followed.
Right, and I think everything you said is right. With the caveat as the things that we would have said in science and medicine 50 years ago have greatly changed, especially medicine. If you would have quizzed a doctor about, you know, even just like something like weight loss, and you know, what makes somebody fat, you know, how do you become, you know, thin? What's the dietary? You think about the food pyramid that was on all the cereal boxes, which has been completely debunked. Right. Somebody at that point, you know, said that was science. What the science said. Right. Yeah. And what you're saying as well, you know, use the scientific methods. Let's keep refining, you know, things. Let's actually pay attention to the data, where it's coming from. You know, does the person presenting the data have any kind of an interest in what they're saying? You know, does it help, you know, increase their funding or you know, whatever the case may be? And that's, we can't completely shut our brains off to that sort of thing, so that we can, you know, so that the truth does come out, and we get closer to making better decisions with science. Right.
And I think in the movie in this regard does respect science in that it was never the science in this movie is true to that, in that it's portrayed as a subject that is meant to be solving issues in the world, right? You're trying to innovate and to find solutions to the problems that we have in the correct way, right? And so it didn't delve too much into the methods and some of the controversy surrounding it, but there were definitely some parts where they could have leaned into making it political, and they didn't, which I was happy with.
Right. Yes. And if I was to say, what do I think the logical takeaways are? Is that, hey, kids, go into science. Science is cool, and be better dads, and repair those family fault lines.
Yeah.
Is what I guess what I would take away from the movie. In a 2+ hour action movie that was very entertaining, if not, imperfect in parts.
Yeah, I think so. I think you helped me see a few imperfections that the movie had. Because when I watched it, I was just enjoying. I enjoyed it so much. I bypassed every little, connotation of error that I had in my head, and I was, oh no, I love this movie.
Yeah.
So
I think this is a recommendation for Tomorrow War.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely worth seeing as long as you are okay with buckets of alien gore. But overall, I think we give this one a seal of approval.
Yeah, I think so. Daniel did not, though.
Okay, all right. So it's now not unanimous. So what is the contrary view here?
Okay, and I want to ask this as a question to you. Having been through a global pandemic now, how did that affect your viewing of this movie?
You know what? I did not think that. I was not thinking of the pandemic, except when I said earlier about the elements to where bioweapons are being engineered to be used against a species.
Okay.
It didn't. And the fact that like we already talked about, were the science. That's kind of my take on it. But I got a feeling that Dania had a different take on it.
Correct. No, I haven't talked to her about it, but I had this feeling, and so when Dania pointed it out, I agreed with her wholeheartedly that like a quarter of the way through the movie, before he is looped into the future, the movie has gripping anxiety.
Yes.
Gripping anxiety.
I
think
the
pandemic played into that so much. It made it so much more realistic because we've seen disaster movies before, and it's like, oh, yeah, disaster movies, But just having been through a pandemic, seeing how it de-escalates into chaos, right? How society can just go crazy because of something that isn't even there.
Right, and I see what you're saying now, because there's that scene in the movie where Chris Pratt jumps back in time. So he's back in the past, and they lose their link to the future, and we see clips of people rioting in the streets, of panic, of nations, tensions escalating, and the general guy says, we might not even need the white spikes to kill us. We might just kill ourselves.
Yeah.
And I see what that sense definitely hit me then, of just the and maybe even when the military was first recruiting him, just that mistrust, the distrust between, government and person.
Yeah, that was expounded on. Yeah, they.
And it did feel very much like all of society is kind of on a knife's point, and an outbreak of coronavirus kind of brings people against each other, which is interesting because at the beginning of the outbreak, there was this feeling of unity, and that lasted about 15 seconds before everything kind of broke down. So I definitely get that 100%.
Yeah, and one of the scenes that really focused it for me was that moment in the classroom, right? Where he's trying to talk about the most pointless thing in science, right? And obviously all of his students just don't care.
Right. Because
they're probably going to die.
Right.
And so they're just like, what's the point, right?
Right.
And it was like they were, I think right before that, they were showing just like this kind of meltdown, this general chaos and meltdown.
Right.
And then it goes to this classroom that's just like, well, what are we supposed to do?
Right. That feeling of hopelessness.
Yeah.
Which definitely was definitely on a lot of people's minds. Over the past year, I saw the numbers just came out a couple days ago about the huge increases in overdoses, overdose drug deaths. I think it was 93,000 people, which is way up from where it was. And yeah, just that feeling of hopelessness,
Right.
that can capture us if we,
Staring in the face of doom.
right, right, and that just says, you know, where you put your faith in matters a ton, yeah. So don't get caught up in the fear, and let's hope aliens don't actually attack in the future. That'll go a long way.
Right. Yeah, but I think that just beginning scene was just done so well to where I felt the anxiety coming off the screen.
Yes.
And Dania felt it too, and she said, "This movie's giving me anxiety," and it was before we even saw an alien.
Right.
You
yes. And subconsciously, I thought this movie, it takes about like 40 minutes before we see an alien.
Yeah.
A
while.
Maybe it was a soundtrack, or maybe it was just that pre-built anxiety in all of us that this seems all too familiar, and we're interpersonalizing everything that's going on inside of us, and that's adding to the tension that's going on screen and making it seem way more on the edge of the seat than it actually was. Yeah.
And believable is a good word because it was realistic. The way everything was playing out, the way they were recruiting people, the training camp, just like the news footage that they were pulling, all of the extras. The extras were just these random citizens putting gear on, going to war.
Right.
It was like, whoa, why is it that I can totally see this happening?
Right. This is, it's eerie. It didn't feel good when the military were just kind of beating up on, Chris Pratt, just being very terse and brief and, basically throwing his life around.
Yeah.
Like, you got a wife and kids? Who cares?
Yeah.
It's like, and it kind of felt like that definitely during the outbreak, where you just had so much, division and coldness between people, and including some people in like government and just other people, right? You saw it on every side of the coin, and and that was unfortunate. And in this movie, it was like, I don't like this, and probably because I didn't like it over the last 12 months.
Yeah. But as much as it was an uncomfortable feeling, I enjoyed that uncomfortable feeling in this movie. As a bit of an adrenaline rush.
I started watching the movie at like 10 o'clock at night, and I made it all the way through, and that tension helped me all the way through it. Instead of like very long movie, but definitely kept me engaged, and that was probably part of it.
Yeah.
All right, any closing thoughts?
Well, we already recapped it before. I remembered that I had that question for you, but I think it was a very well done and well timed movie. As far as the pandemic, I like that we have so many thoughts about it that relate to the culture today.
Right.
And my prediction is that it will be a stand-up cultural movie.
Yeah. I don't know if I would go that far, because I don't think it's as good as Edge of Tomorrow. It certainly has more heart than Edge of Tomorrow. But I think this movie is not going to fade into obscurity. I think people will, with it being on Amazon Prime, it's going to get watched a lot.
Yeah.
And going to be in the back of our minds.
Right. Well, cultural. Maybe it's not as good, but timing-wise, especially coming out right after the pandemic, right? I think people are going to remember it for that reason. Right. Remember when the pandemic was ending and that one movie came out that was about the world ending? Right?
Yes. Absolutely.
I think that will make it a much more memorable film because I've already forgotten the Edge of Tomorrow.
All right. Well, there you have it. So, everyone, this has been our conversation about Tomorrow War. And so, thank you for listening to Bad Dads.
Yes.
If you made it this far. And until next time, I'm Nathaniel.
And I'm Seth.
Take care, everybody.
Goodbye.